Imagine living without a refrigerator during the time of kings and queens, especially throughout the Middle Ages and part of the early modern age. Today, opening the fridge and finding fresh food seems like something ordinary, but for centuries people lived without any form of electric refrigeration. The refrigerator, as we know it today, only began to become popular at the beginning of the 20th century. Before that, both the nobility and common people had to find other ways to preserve food, using methods that varied according to the climate, culture, available resources, and social status. In medieval Europe, keeping food fresh was a major challenge. Meat, milk, and other perishable products spoiled quickly, especially during the summer. For this reason, many houses and castles had underground pantries, known as cellars or basements, where the temperature was naturally lower. These spaces helped preserve certain foods for longer, although they were far from offering the safety of a modern refrigerator. Among peasants, the most common solution was to preserve food using traditional methods. Salt was one of the most important resources of the time. Meat and fish were covered with large amounts of salt to prevent decomposition. Sun-drying was also widely used, especially for fish, fruits, and herbs. Another very common method was smoking, in which foods were exposed to smoke for long periods, helping to extend their shelf life. In villages, many families also fermented foods to increase their preservation time. Vegetables could be placed in brine or vinegar, creating preparations similar to what we now know as pickles. Cheese and butter were produced by hand and consumed over the course of weeks or months. Among kings and nobles, the situation. Larger castles had big pantries and specialized kitchens where food was stored with greater care. In cold regions, blocks of ice taken from frozen lakes could be kept in underground structures called ice houses. Covered with straw and sawdust, these blocks could last for months and help keep certain foods fresh for longer. Even so, food waste was relatively common. Royal banquets often involved large quantities of food prepared on the same day, since storing leftovers for long periods was difficult. In different parts of the world, other solutions were developed. In Northern Europe, the natural cold helped preserve food for much of the year. In warmer regions, such as the Mediterranean and the Middle East, preservation with olive oil, salt, and vinegar was essential. Dried fruits, stored grains, and legumes were important components of the diet. It is important. Many people were used to consuming dried, salted, or fermented foods. The strong flavor of these methods was part of the daily diet and was considered normal. For peasants, the reality could be even more difficult. The lack of efficient preservation methods meant that periods of scarcity were frequent. Poor harvests or poorly preserved stocks could quickly lead to hunger. That is why storing grains and dried foods was essential to survive the winter. Living without a refrigerator, therefore, was not seen as something strange. It was simply the reality for centuries. People developed techniques such as salting, drying, smoking, and fermenting to preserve food and ensure their survival. Only with the advances of science and technology in the 19th and 20th centuries did modern refrigeration methods emerge. The invention of electric refrigerators completely transformed the way of storing food, allowing meats, dairy products, fruits, and vegetables to stay fresh for much longer. In short, living without a refrigerator during the era of monarchies required constant planning and adaptation. Even in luxurious palaces, food relied on the same basic techniques used by peasants. The convenience of easily preserving food, something so common today, simply did not exist for kings, queens, and their subjects. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe so you don't miss the next curious story on our channel.